Hey, thank you. So the three of us are up here to kind of give you an informational overview for the upcoming pension solution budget request in November. And we also thought it would take a little bit of time up front, not too much, to kind of give a little bit of a background and overview of actually what the program is, because I know there's been a lot of discussion of what's the Business Renew, what's Business Direct, what's the program, what's the projects. So it'll help clarify that and kind of set us on the same path. So thank you.
Sorry.
So let's take a quick step back in history for those of you who weren't here. Back in 2007, the board really came to the realization from a number of projects and issues that were brought to them that our current technology infrastructure was not adequate to fill our strategic goals and meet our needs. It also carried with it a lot of risks and inability to really create efficiencies. And like Peggy suggested, to date, we've really squeezed as much efficiency out of the current system as we can. So they put staff on the path to develop a plan and an implementation for how we're going to replace our technology infrastructure. So in 2007, we kicked off what was known as the Future State Architecture Project, was really the planning stage for Business Renew, which is what we're in now. And that project had three deliverables out of it. The first one, and which is probably most pertinent to today's discussion, is we did a thorough analysis on whether or not we should replace our current pension system start, or should we invest money in trying to refresh and upgrade it. The results of that analysis came out with a recommendation and approval by EPIC to go ahead down the path of replacing our current pension system, because it was really built on outdated technology, which was becoming harder and harder to support, and look for long-term resources to support that. The second deliverable that came out of that was a solutions framework, which is basically an IT strategic plan for CalSTRS to go forward. And it really covered four of our core business areas: an accounting strategy, a pension administration strategy, a customer service strategy, and an information management strategy. And the following deliverable, the implementation roadmap, really set out the separate projects and timelines to implement projects and technologies to address those different strategies. So here's what you see here is the list of the Business Renew projects, and they're really rolled under the umbrella of the program called Business Renew. So if you looked at Business Renew as kind of the overarching umbrella, and these are the smaller projects underneath it. And really the first phase of implementation was the implementation of Business Direct, which we just finished release 1 this last January, and anticipating to finish the release 1.5 very soon. And that was really to address the shortfalls and the risks associated with our accounting system strategy. The next, and probably the biggest project that we're going to have going forward, is the pension solution replacement. So that was started out with a lot of planning built into it. So it started out with a discovery effort, which is really to kind of get a high-level idea of how much this was going to cost, how long it was going to take, what kind of resources we were going to need, and whether it was really feasible to go down this path of replacing our START system. It really kind of validated what was done in the previous analysis on replacement. That was completed in May of 2012. And it was approved to go forward into the implementation strategy. And the first phase of implementation is where we're at now, which is actually developing the RFP and procurement documents and soliciting the funding to go forward to actually purchase and implement the system. So that started back in earlier in February, and we are looking at getting the RFP on the street in November. Also, in parallel with that is a data preparation analysis, which is where also currently underway. What a lot of IT system conversions have short-sighted on is they don't really address the data. And if you don't address your data, you have a really brand new shiny system that just really gives you bad data faster. So we're really being proactive, and we initiated an analysis of how we're going to address our data issues so we can prepare our data so it's as clean as possible when we convert into the new system. Halfway through that, we also look at, from a proactive approach, we wanted to look at what do we do to make sure that the data that we clean stays that way, and that future data and information comes in cleanly, so we're not continually having to revisit that. So we actually broke out a data management strategy into its own project, which is the Enterprise Information Management Project, which you'll hear more about in item 6 today. And then finally, we also have a supporting but really critical project of requirements management, which is acquiring a automated tool and processes so we can manage our requirements for the pension solution and future projects. And it allows us to map our business requirements and our system requirements all the way back to the teacher retirement law and regulations. So if we ever have any changes into regulations or law, it really gives us a good impact on how that impacts the systems, and we have a better way to estimate timelines and costs and effort to make changes to the systems as we move forward. Up until 2012, all of these large projects were really managed separately as large projects under the PMO, but really they all have a significant amount of dependencies on each other, not only from a resource perspective, but from a scheduling perspective, risk and issue management perspective. They all really overlap. So we decided in 2012 to roll those into what we call as a program from the Project Management Institute, which is really a collection of large or related projects under one umbrella, so you can have common management of risk issues, governance and decision making, and maximize the use of resources so you can have resources working on multiple projects as opposed to dedicated to separate projects. So the governance for the program is a little bit more streamlined. Typically, we have project steering committees, which includes project sponsors, a project manager, and business leads, and they make a lot of the decisions for changes, risks, and issue management at the project level. However, any projects, risks, or issues or changes that impact across multiple Business Renew projects or the enterprise as a whole, those really get managed up at the Business Renew program level. So they get managed through the Business Renew Executive Office, and who works in collaboration with the Business Renew Executive Steering Committee, which is made up of representatives of the executive staff, most of them being sponsors of the projects, and then has an escalation point up to the Chief Executive Officer, the Chief Operating Officer, and ultimately to you. So that is part of the governance and reporting would be to you as the Teacher Retirement Board. You also have our independent project oversight consultant, Grant Thornton, who you have been hearing reports on for the last year on the status of these projects, and they really are the independent eyes and ears for you on ensuring that the program governance is being followed, that the program level risks and issues are being managed correctly. So they are an important advisory to you and as well as the program teams. And with that, I will turn it over to Peggy and Rob to talk about the budget request.
So Robin has queued up the budget proposal, and if we slip over, I just wanted to remind you that this is what we're projecting right now in terms of what our budget needs are going to be. You might wonder, at the 53 FTEs and 3.6 million, that doesn't quite seem to be in line with the other projections, but those include some partial year funding. So we've taken into account that those are not necessarily resources starting day one on the project. We really wanted to focus on how we can adequately plan for what our need is going to be in terms of subject matter experts, system experts, knowledgeable people, and keep our production responsibilities foremost in our minds. We are pulling out a core set of individuals. They will be that core team dedicated 100% to the project. And those will be some of our most experienced and most knowledgeable employees. But we have been, for the past 2 years, working on stepping up our bench and creating additional opportunities and challenges and learning environments for staff below them. And so our strategy is really one of, much as described by Robin, but in the business areas in particular, our strategy is one of a cascade up approach. We pull out the most experienced workers. We replace them with knowledgeable workers who have a lot of promise, who've demonstrated an ability to take on additional challenges and responsibilities, and have been preparing for that. and then our actual fill behind or our backfill comes in at a lower level. So we're not replacing a knowledge worker with an unskilled worker right away. We're bringing them in through our normal process. We want to bring them into the organization in our typical fashion, provide them with the appropriate level of training and support in order to do their jobs well. But this provides a good career path and good upward mobility opportunity for many of our existing staff as they go through our phased implementation process. The business areas are also anticipating that we will be able to fill some of these positions a little bit before need, so that we have a chance to get those people trained, sitting side by side, as well as comfortable with the business, so we're not turning over segments of the business to unskilled or relatively inexperienced employees. We really know that we have to keep our business operating during this time. Customer service is a critical aspect for us. The project plan, if we go back to this slide, is adding incrementally. We currently have 11 core staff members. We'll be adding the additional complement to get to the 53 core members in 14-15, or staff members in 14-15, but these are the staff who really are helping us with the project, but they're not all working on the project all of the same time. We may need to matrix them in and out as we're doing a phased implementation for the project. It's not a big bang. So the shift of resources may change, or where those resources are located may change throughout the course of the project. We don't yet know what our phasing will be. That's dependent on the solution that we provide and the vendor's preferred way of doing business or planned way of doing business. So I can't tell you with 100% certainty that we've gotten our staff estimates exactly right, and we may be able to make, or it may be necessary for us to make some shifts in those exact numbers as we move along. But we did map out our entire expectation cycle. It's on a huge piece of paper, probably as big as your display screen up here, that lists all of the activities, all of the tasks, all of the business areas, and the hours that we estimate are going to be required in order to accomplish that need. We have vetted that out through the project team developed it. We vetted it out through the management team. We're pretty confident that we have a very good understanding of the resource requirements necessary for us to successfully execute this project. But it does take resources to do that. We've had some degree of, in my business areas for the past several years, because of the complexities of the current system and the number of changes that we've been making to that current system, we have developed some what we call systems and project staff. So they are really the ones who help us keep the system operating and help us make through and navigate through all of the changes necessary for that system operation. So when we pull some of those people out for the project, they don't really affect production. They don't affect our customer service aspects as much. So, we're really trying to do this in a way that minimizes service degradations. We anticipate that there will be 5 phases for the project. That's what we're suggesting in the RFP, but the vendor may come back with a different number for us, which could adjust our timing on some of these things. But in our planning, we have 3 functional phases. They each take about 15 months with a 3-month overlap, because as we're beginning the implementation and finalizing testing in one, we can begin the development of the next. So we really are trying to use our time effectively and efficiently, utilize our resources as effectively as possible. We've had many internal discussions on what are the roles that we need to fill on the project and how do we find the resourced individuals, the skilled individuals to fill those. We know that we are very aware of the ever-evolving demographics of CalSTRS, and so we are looking at ways for us to anticipate staff turnover due to retirements and just other normal attrition, and bring people in and keep them as skilled and up to speed as possible so that we continue to perform. So our request is really asking for $43 million and 75 positions over 5 years. I want you to be clear that this request does not include vendor costs. This is the cost for internal staffing requirements. It's a mixture of business staff, IT staff, and project-related staff that the business has to commit, the business of CalSTRS has to commit in order to work successfully with the vendor to achieve the intended outcomes of the future system. A lot of our intent, is that one? Is to really increase, and what I have referred to earlier, it's to really increase our staff's productivity and reduce member transaction costs without rework and manual workload associated with simple transactions. It drives our costs down, the accuracy of our benefit payments and our benefit processes increases, and we're able to deliver a faster, better, and more accurate product to the membership. We're also able to provide some customer self-service that we're not able to provide now and help put members in control of their own data and their own accounts, and certainly provide more visibility and more options to them than we're able to do now. And we reduce risks associated with our aging and complex system. I'm not at all naive enough to think that a new system won't have its own complexities, but for those of you who were here 2 years ago when I showed you the START system and the DOS-based green screens of death, you know what I'm talking about when I say that any new system that comes in with a GUI interface and a logical flow and complete processing will be better. And it will provide our staff with an opportunity to move away from doing some of the labor-intensive transactions, manual work, to doing more customer value, customer high-touch work that our members want and need from us. So go ahead.
On which one?
I think you're next.
Okay. Thank you.
Chris, before we start, I do have someone in mind. Tom,
Okay.
do you want to ask your question now, or do you want to wait till the end of the presentation?
Well, I would. I think two questions. One, you've identified the potential for a variety of different types of efficiency savings, which is great. Makes a lot of sense to do it. Can you quantify those in terms of what you think it will take out of it in terms of cost? So in other words, what is the actual percentage ROI on the investment?
We've actually done a very detailed assessment of what we think our ROI will be. You know, obviously, the proof is the post-mortem on whether you accomplished that. And in our budget change proposal documentation, we've included that extensive ROI analysis based on the financial as well as the qualitative impact that we're going to have. Well, it's roughly between 50 and 60% of current operating costs.
A reduction.
A reduction, yes.
So the ROI itself would be enormous then.
Yes. We're anticipating that it would be enormous. You know, there are some unknowns in that equation right now. We've estimated what we think that the vendor costs will be. We don't exactly know. We haven't made all of the decisions about whether we're hosting or externally hosting, what the cost differentials are between those. We have maintenance, ongoing maintenance that will be required for the system. We don't exactly know what those charges are going to be yet or who's going to do them. You know, those are all decisions that we're aware of and have thought about, but we've not yet needed to make them. So, obviously there are some cost elements that go away. We no longer pay for our current mainframe data center, but we do have additional costs associated with other aspects of the system, hardware, software configurations. But we believe that there will be significant savings to the system.
Yeah, that sounds terrific. I mean, from my perspective as a director, conceptually, it makes a lot of sense, and the big question I'd have is, what's the projected ROI? And given what you're saying, it's enormous, and we should clearly be doing this for all sorts of reasons, so it's great.
Okay. So obviously, given the size and the complexity of this project and the duration of it, there's a lot of risk, and it's apparent that there's a lot of media out there talking, especially lately, about IT projects and the risks associated with those. So we've really, ever since all the way back to the future state planning stage, we've really built a lot of risk mitigation into how we're doing this project, as well as all the other large projects that we have within CalSTRS. So I just thought it would be a good idea to cover a lot of these, since it's really in everyone's best interest to make sure that we're doing the right thing. So a lot of the key ones that we're doing is, first of all, we engage in experienced pension and project experts. One of the benefits of having an ERM system like Robin's just implemented is there's a lot of data, there's a lot of experts out there, there's a lot of benchmarking of data out there for those kind of systems. Pension solutions are a little bit different. We don't have a lot of variety of wealth of research and information out there. So we actually have hired one of the top firms in the pensions industry to work with us, and that's LRW Weschler. And they actually have been involved in implementing over 59 various systems throughout the world for pension solutions. And they have a wealth of information with them, a library experience, a library of information from requirements to business rules to contract language that we've really been able to leverage. We've also engaged our legal firm of Reed Smith, who has a lot of experience in doing IT procurements and contracting, because this is going to be a very large procurement and contract that we're going to have a relationship with a vendor for quite a long time. So we want to make sure that the procurement methodology and the procurement solution we use really leverages getting us a best value for CalSTRS, and that the resulting contract is something that's beneficial and workable for a long-term relationship with a vendor. We've also done a lot of market research prior to the procurement. We actually did our first piece of market research during the development of the implementation roadmap. We had a set of vendor presentations come in here and kind of show us what, at the time, back in 2009, what the industry was, what their products could do, what their functionality was. And then when we hired Weschler, they came in and actually did as part of their discovery document, they laid out some additional information regarding what's available in the industry, what the trends of the industry were going forward, whether or not what we were asking for in our vision was realistic. And then we just recently followed up with another set of market research with the vendor community. We had 13 vendors come in here and kind of do the same thing. We had discussions with them, tell us what your systems do, tell us what your vision and experiences with the future of the pension industry are. What's changes, what's the trends for member self-services, what kind of things do you have built in there? And then we actually published the results of those into a request for information document that we've actually published for the project teams, and we've used all of that market research information gathered and developing the RFP and the requirements for our new system. We've also incorporated a lot of lessons learned. Lessons learned is especially from the project circles, a lot of projects do lessons learned, but where they really fall off is the next projects don't really look at them. They kind of do them, put them on a shelf, and they don't do anything with them. But we're actually, we have a lot of lessons learned from our own internal projects. We've also gathered a lot of lessons learned from other pension system implementations, as well as other large IT implementations, both in California and in the private sector. And really, they fall out of all that information. You would think that there's a plethora of different things that can happen, but they really fall into 4 different themes. It's communication and change management, adequate staffing, which we talked about, Peggy talked about earlier, making sure that you have not only the number of people, but the right trained and qualified people to work on your projects. Data cleansing, which I talked about earlier. A lot of people forget that the result of part of the purpose of doing a system is so you can get that data out so that you can actually serve your members. So we're being proactive in data cleansing. And these have all been addressed either in a separate project or as part of the project plan for pension solution. We've also established really close relationships with a couple of our peers. New York SLRS and Texas Teachers are both going through a similar effort right now. They're a little bit ahead of us. But but we're have constant communications with them. So as they're finding out things through their procurement and implementation process, we're sharing information back and forth so we can actually implement things that they've learned on more of a real-time basis as we're moving down our process. And our lessons learned will continue throughout this project as we go. We don't just wait till the end of the projects. As we finish different phases or different milestones, we take a look back and look at what can we change going forward to make sure that we're mitigating as much risk as possible. Adequate resources assigned to the project, we just talked about that. And then early engagement through change management and communications. Another big lessons learned for a lot of large IT project failures is there's a lot of focus on making sure that your technical solution is sound and works. But if you don't prepare your staff for the changes that are going to result from that, and they don't adopt it, you don't really have a truly successful project. In fact, a lot of times you can have your technical solution up fast, but if you don't have adoption, your actual realizing the benefits of your technical implementation actually takes a lot longer, because now you're just now getting staff to beware and learn the new system and be able to take advantage of the new functionality of the system. So we actually have started change management activities and communications with our staff now. We've been having a lot of change management readiness assessments with the business. We just finished working with Peggy's group in the benefits and services area. We're starting to work in the IT area, and really it's kind of getting a lot of interviews with the staff, kind of getting a baseline of where they're at and being ready to accept change. And then from that, we can build proactive communications and change plans to get them adequately ready. So when we get into the new system, they're ready to and excited and engaged in actually using it. We have a flexible procurement and phased implementation based contract. I alluded to this a little bit, but really we're looking at doing a procurement different than, at least for the state, is quite different. It's really focused on a lot of communication and engagement with the vendor community before we actually go out for an RFP for them to respond to. So we have multiple steps along with, we've already done the market research with the RFI, but we also have a lot of back and forth communication with them. So when we actually get responses to the RFP, it's going to be a high likelihood that they understand what our needs are and we understand what their solutions are, and we're both on the same page. So when we actually go into implementation, it should streamline that effort and allow us to actually work collaboratively to get to the solution. Adherence to best practice methodologies. Project management and system development lifecycle, those are the technical Bibles for actually implementing projects. And you will find that a lot of failed IT projects, it's not really one big decision or one big mistake that dooms them. It's really the culmination of a lot of small things. So if you're not following certain project management methodologies, or you're skipping over some key steps in the system development lifecycle, that really is the culmination of those really creates the failure. So we have a pretty sound project management and system development lifecycle methodologies that we are going to really hold the vendors accountable to following. But at the same time, they're going to come in with their own methodologies. We're not going to make them use something that they're not used to, especially a lot of these larger vendors have an internal methodology. So as long as it meets the industry standards that we would adopt, we're not going to have them change their business, so we can just make them use ours. Sound and transparent.
If I could, I'm real concerned that our current process is inefficient. So if we replicate the current process, we fail. So we really want to take advantage of a streamlined process that's been implemented successfully in other environments. And to the extent that we can, adapt our process to utilize that functionality, that workflow. We're anticipating that our system is one that will be built on on a set of business rules that we control and on tables for data and other information. That means that as a result of changes in the technology, we can change our business rules and we can update our tables, but we're not outdated in terms of technology, and our current system is hard-coded for almost everything. So any type of small change requires hard coding of that change. We want to get away from that as a methodology, and that's part of what we're hearing in terms of best practice, is that you don't have a hard-coded system. You have one that gives you more flexibility and the ability to update and upgrade your technology as you move through without losing the integrity of your data.
Sound and transparent program governance. CalSTRS has had over 10 years of successful project implementations, and a lot of that is attributed to we have a very robust internal governance process. With the implementation of Business Renew, we're actually taking that a step further so we can actually be more mature ourselves further and include the board in that. So your participation is key, and your engagement with this is really refreshing and is going to be key to the success for that. On top of that, as part of the governance process, we have an IPOC, Grant Thornton, that they really report to you. And as I alluded to before, they are your eyes and ears. A lot of projects don't have that. They have the IPOC reporting to somebody at some lower level in the organization. But these guys are really, truly independent by reporting to you. So they work for you, and they can give you the transparent reporting that you're going to require to make some of the tough decisions as we go down the road.
Chris, we have a couple people with questions.
Okay.
Michael?
All of this is very impressive, and I'm most impressed with the level of detail that you guys are going through in trying to put all this stuff together. To what extent are all of your efforts going to be hampered by what's going on at the district level? I mean, to a certain extent, we're interfacing with, districts that may or may not have technology that is going to be as advanced as what we're going to have.
Well, we're anticipating that one of the phases of the project implementation will deal with the employer interface and their ability to communicate with us and transmit data and contribution information to us. We currently do that through a secure employer network, and we worked very successfully with our employers 4 years ago to create a new pathway and a new methodology for that reporting. However, we know that the reporting structure as it exists today will change. We're going to want and need more data elements. We're going to want and need more functionality from the employers. And we've already begun our change management outreach to those employers by having meetings with them. We're starting the dialogue now to engage them in the changes that are coming. Certainly there are lessons learned opportunities for us here, as CalPERS has recently undertaken a new pension system implementation that worked with many of our same employers. And so the employers have told us what worked and what they would like to see done differently as a result of the PERS implementation. And so we're taking heed of that feedback so that when we provide the employers with tools, they're able to use and access those tools. We're not going to require them to conform their current payroll systems to meet our reporting requirements. Rather, we'll establish a reporting requirement that they should be able to do an upload feed from their existing payroll systems. There are many of them that are in operation throughout the state. We certainly have no uniformity in how school districts and county offices manage payroll. And so we recognize that our system has to be able to accept information uniformly, the same information about all individuals, but the source systems that it's coming from will be different. We're anticipating that all of that communication will be through a web interface. They all have capabilities of doing that. They're doing it now. 100% of our employers are reporting through us electronically now. The process that we used to develop that secure employer website significantly reduced errors and inconsistencies and exceptions to the data to the point where we're very confident about the accuracy of the data in our system, and employers are required to correct and or justify anything that falls outside one of our established parameters prior to uploading the data into our system. And it's so successful, we were able to implement a penalties and interest set of regulations that says if you don't report to us on time and if you don't report to us accurately, we're going to penalize you. And so, the employers are well aware of their responsibility for reporting to us. We're not going to be asking them for any data that they don't already have, because that would impose a new requirement that could be very costly for their systems. But we believe that, and the early information we've gotten from the employers that we've worked with so far, is that we will be able to guide them and assist them through the conversion process. One of the members of our core team now for Business Renew and for the Pension Solution is someone who comes from my member account services area, which deals exclusively with the employer relationships. He is now our employer liaison, our employer expert on the project. So we have dedicated resources that will head our efforts to keep our employers communicated with, understanding what's going on, prepared for the changes, and able to accept and adopt. Just like we need to make sure our staff are able to utilize the new system and recognize it and see its value and benefit, our employers must also. And so they're an active part of our change management activity.
Sharon?
And if I can permit a little commentary on your, because I think your question is a good one. I think from an educator's perspective, the quality of the data that the districts send to CalSTRS has been a lot of the issue, at least from my perspective. So you don't have to comment on that, Peggy, but I'll let you just. But I think it's been less the interface and more of the accuracy of data being sent to CalSTRS. But my questions are around, I just wanted to understand about the oversight, because I think one of the questions I have as a board member is how do we as a board provide good oversight with these projects, because it's obviously it's huge and it's long and
it's a lot of money.
and it's a lot of money and there's a lot of moving parts, and I do want to thank the staff. I know I was one of the ones that requested a little bit more clarity about the different projects that we're working on, so I really appreciated this item because it helped me understand all the different pieces, and the timeline is really helpful, so thank you for your work on that. So with Graham Thornton,
Grant
Grant
Thornton.
Thornton, sorry.
Graham works for
Sorry.
Grant Thornton. There you go.
Okay, wait. Oh gosh, seriously? Okay, so Grant Thornton has been providing oversight to us as a board on Business Direct. Is that a commitment to do the whole Business Renew
Yes.
program? So that's a 7-year commitment that we've made with a partnership with them, so that Graham or whoever from Grant Thornton will come in and report on a regular basis. Business Direct, then Pension Solution, data prep. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. We'll continue. He'll continue what he's doing
Whoever
now.
it is, right, but Grant Thornton will provide that kind of oversight to us as a board for the
Correct.
duration of Business Renew.
Correct.
Okay.
And he does have a team. I don't want to put it all on his shoulders. They have specialists that work in different aspects of this project, so it isn't all,
Right.
there's not a key man risk associated with that oversight.
Right.
I don't want to leave it that impression.
I guess that's just, the challenge I feel is, even just as we've started out with Business Direct, I've appreciated having, kind of independent group come in and kind of provide us with a little bit of a, the green, red, yellow indicators of where we're at on our projects. And I guess I just have a question moving forward, because I am, sobered, and I agree it's time to upgrade, and I'm supportive of this whole project. I guess, again, as fiduciaries and as trustees, my question is how do we best provide oversight? And in terms of the budget, my concerns are budget and timelines. Are we kind of moving along in a timely manner? Are we meeting our our budgetary constraints? And is Grant Thornton, that role meant to be kind of the primary way that we are able to get information to provide that oversight? Or are there other ways that we as a board can, get information so we can best provide oversight? I guess I'm wondering. Peggy?
Let me start, and then certainly others can fill in. I don't think you have to have a one-size-fits-all solution for how you get information. Certainly, you will continue to receive your update from Grant Thornton on Pension Solution and all of the Business Renew related projects every time that the board meets. So that is a given. You will get that. But we can bring a discussion on the status of the Pension Solution project back before you at whatever frequency you desire. We are rich with meetings and internal communication and documentation and activities associated with.
Very
I'm gonna use that in my next district meeting.
We really have a rigorous and vigorous and well-documented and supported process in place to make sure that we're capturing all decisions, that we're documenting meeting minutes, that we're providing adequate record storage, that we're transparent in our activities. And so we're able to bring that back to you on a semi-annual basis, on a quarterly basis, whatever is going to make the most sense. We certainly expect that we'll be coming back to you with a budget refresh information as we move through all of the fiscal years. While we're asking you for basically budget authority for the whole project, it doesn't mean that we're necessarily limited to those dollar amounts in each year. It gives us the flexibility, as Robin indicated earlier, to be a little more fluid with that by having us in the separate pull-out budget. Because while we're good at thinking about it, until we're actually there, we don't know what our exact experience is going to be, and a few million here and there, could be shifting. What we didn't want was to be constrained with a hard stop because we didn't have enough money in a particular fiscal year. And so we've mitigated against that through this different budgeting methodology. Internally, we're meeting on a regular basis to go over the status and update of the project, similar to what Grant Thornton does with you to provide an update. They also meet with the sponsors on a monthly basis on these major projects and with the project steering committees on a monthly basis to provide opportunity for discussion and feedback. We see their ratings. They give us a more detailed report than what is shared with you that is red, green, yellow based on a variety of factors and categories, and so we can see that, yes, we're doing great on schedule, no, we're not doing good on this. So it really helps give us the ability to attract attention. And then in addition, they also meet independently with Jack and Cassandra and Chris to provide them with an update on what's going on. So we think we have a sophisticated process for keeping information flowing through the organization, and we're certainly able to provide you with whatever level of detail you will be comfortable with, because it's a big apple to be biting out of.
Right. Well,
There's no
I just
question.
wondered, and maybe I should ask you, Dana, or, sort of, what is the plan in terms of board meetings, in terms of reporting in on the projects, or is that?
Well, the Grant Thornton will report on every board meeting. So, and what we could also do, which is open up to your discretion, is if you want to have them do an educational session on IT project risk or a topic that really you have a lot of questions on, they can come in and do an educational session for you if you want. So pretty much, like, as Peggy said, any kind of information, education that you desire, we can provide to you through oversight, and Grant Thornton can
I don't
provide
think
that.
I'll speak for myself, I doubt any of us really want to get into the minutia, because that's what we trust our very, well-trained, excellent staff to do. But I think that's the challenge, is providing oversight and kind of doing our job, our role with such a huge kind of long-term project. And I find that to be, there's some challenges in that, so.
Can I just, maybe that's some more context to the oversight piece. Time and budget, clearly two extraordinarily important things, because as Chris so well said, those are where some of the big state projects failed. Missed a lot of time frames, way over budget, et cetera. But for your comfort, those have some of the more factual measurements around them. I'll tell you where my worry is, because I know we've got a great 10-year history here of project management, so we're going to reduce the risk on those factors a lot here. The biggest concern is that the project delivers the objectives of what we're trying to accomplish. Much harder to talk about, much harder to measure, much harder to give you
I
comfort.
assume that was a given.
Well,
Maybe I
it-
should be explicit about it. Of course we
the
want
reason
to
it
be.
isn't, I think, I think these conversations often get reduced to time and budget because it's so often that they get off track and people concerned about it. So often oversight conversations are about that. Where are you this month? You're off 2 weeks, you're up 2 weeks. And then we get concerned or not. What I'm concerned is, it's okay with me if it gets off 2 weeks, if we're getting a better quality definition to the business requirements, et cetera. So The things I think you ought to ask Graham also are is getting him to interact with you around that. Are we delivering what it is? And that's what I'm watching. You know, if I think the RFP is not ripe, or Peggy or Robin don't, it's probably because something was caught inside the organization that says, we haven't thoroughly thought through this yet, the business requirements. So that's, I want to make sure as we really, because as you can tell by the body of this agenda today, the temperature in the organization is starting to change. And this will, Dana has heard this the other round when they did start, but it really does weigh heavily on the organization, all of our attention as this one gets underway, since Business Direct was really quite a small project compared to this. Brian's going to talk a little bit about just maybe also your fiduciary responsibility relative to the oversight of it as well. That's probably a valuable insight as well.
Thank you. I just wanted to get back to the beginning of your question, Sharon, when you talked about, you know, how are you going to exercise your fiduciary duty as you do this? And I would encourage you to treat the independent oversight, Grant Thornton, as your consultant, as you would any other consultant on anything else. And as you feel like things need to be addressed or brought to you, or you need to drill down, so you're getting a report, and I'm not saying it's not a vigorous report, but if you feel like you need additional information or you want something brought back by the independent oversight officer, that would be an appropriate exercise. And I really encourage you to use the, Grant Thornton as you would any other consultant, reporting to you and your eyes and ears in the organization.
That's one of the reasons why we established them to report to you, is for that specific reason. So you can have that opportunity to use them as your consultant. And Graham, when he comes up, we'll talk about what Jack was talking about. Really, the focus is going to start shifting for IPOC. While they still have a portion of what they'll report to you is the minutia of the schedule and budget and all that. It's really going to be more focused, are we meeting our objectives? Because it is easy to get caught up in some of the minutia and get distracted from that, and it starts taking you away from your objectives. So Graham's report today will be the first step in kind of looking at an objective focus, meeting our business objectives for you.
Ready? Is that it, Sharon? Tom?
My question was kind of similar, but maybe a little bit more specific. What I think I'd be looking for is an articulation at the beginning of the project of near-term milestones that we would cross, that would tell us this is going well, this is going slower than we think, there's more definition that's required, so that you'd be looking at very specific milestones, 6 months in, 9 months in, a year and a half in. I think that would be a helpful criteria to set out for the board in advance of jumping off on this long march.
And so if I may, the first phase of the project is the planning phase with the vendor, where all of those expectations and timelines and opportunities get documented. And we're unable to, we have ideas now. We do have a detailed project schedule, and we think we know what's going to happen. We don't know yet which order phasing is going in, but we're asking for it to be a phased implementation so that we have off-ramps in the event the vendor is not able to meet our needs and not able to provide us with the product that we need. It's a little more complex in some regards to do that because we have to bridge back with the existing system, but it saves us from a pass-fail.
Sure.
And there will be logical milestones for us to come back to the board with that keep you assured that from the staff perspective, we're meeting our needs and objectives, and we're working in a diligent and reasonable fashion. And you obviously must have that independent voice speaking to what their observation is, based on their knowledge of similar systems, similar activities and efforts, and the progress that they're observing. They are in all of our team meetings and all of our activities, so they're intimate with what's going on with each stage of the process.
Right. So maybe because I've lived through not enough of these projects, if we were to approve this in November, what would I expect to hear from in May as to what's been accomplished?
By May, we would still be in contract negotiations. We're anticipating that once, I have to remember the time frame. We're anticipating that we'll release the RFP in November. That the RFP process, that involved process that culminates in a signed contract, we expect that that will take about a year, based on the way we're structuring it to do a kind of a draft response and then a final response. There's a multi-stage process involved. There are site visits. There are all kinds of activities associated with that. So by May, we'll definitely know which vendors
Right, okay.
are engaged, but we won't have a solution yet, and we won't be at contract signature yet.
And we'll break down the procurement timeline that Peggy's
Yeah.
referring to into milestones, so we'll be able to report to you in May where we're at, where we expected to be, and where we're actually at in those milestones, so.
Right, and I guess one thing is whether there are vendors who are saying they can deliver to our specs.
Correct.
Yeah, okay, I mean, that's a big step.
And all of the work that we've done with the vendor community, we're confident that we have given them enough information already for them to make an assessment about whether they have a product that can meet our needs or not. Whether they choose to, remains to be seen. But we've certainly done the outreach to that community. They have an understanding of what our high-level requirements are. They have an understanding of what our expectations are. So we want a procurement process that is as clear and transparent for us and for the vendors so that we get the product we intend to. And they deliver the product we intend for them to deliver.
Okay, thanks.
Paul?
Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for all of this presentation, and in particular, creating the whole timeline, the context, the terminology, that this project used to be called that project, things like that. Very helpful, very helpful for those of us who can't remember from one meeting to the next.
Amen.
So, I've heard a lot about, making sure we have the best system and that it meets our needs and things like that. But my sense is that there's the offsetting consideration that every time you try to customize to get the best thing and you deviate from, therefore, the ability to rely on a commercial off-the-shelf system, that's when you run into trouble. That when I've asked people, because I haven't myself been through this, but I work with lots of large public agencies in my business, and when I ask people, what's the best way to mitigate risk? They say, buy a commercial off-the-shelf system. And as soon as you deviate from that, you're opening yourself up to a lot more risk. So to what degree are we able to do that? And to the degree that we're not, how do we, because the sense I get is if you don't do that, once you're starting down the path of trying to create your own system, and if it starts out wrong, it's very hard to correct it. So that seems to me to be a really big risk mitigation consideration, is to try as much as possible to be using an off-the-shelf system. And how much are we doing that, and how much are we going to get reporting about the ability to use off-the-shelf modules, components, things like that?
The strategy for this whole implementation is there's really not a true COT system out there for pension. It's really more of there's a framework, and they start out with what we'll call a MOTS or a modified, because different organizations have different systems and requirements and needs. But we start with something that's pretty common with all of the other pension systems. It's something that's already been established or implemented somewhere. And it's similar to a COTS perspective. The strategy is to work our business processes around what the system being offered to us will be, and not try to have them do a lot of customization unless it's something that's required by law or something like that. But the default is to change our business process around what the system provides us so we can address some of that risk mitigation perspective.
And I think that part of our strategy is to build, we purposely didn't re-engineer our business processes now because we want to take advantage of the processing that comes with the new system. So if it has a robust workflow process for us to follow, we're going to adapt our systems to do that. We're recognizing now that our organizational structure in the business areas, the benefits and services areas, may look different as a result of new system implementation. We might not be organized the same way that we are now with the same division and branch structure. It may require us to rethink how we group people together to do the work of the system. So we're maintaining an open perspective on how much we can be adaptive. As Chris indicated, we can't implement an aspect of the system that's contrary to our law. And each pension system has some unique qualities about it or quirkiness about it that require the vendors who are servicing this industry to build some flexibility into their processes in order to accommodate that. So they're well aware that there are idiosyncrasies associated with each system and that it isn't like an accounting system where there might be more standardization. There isn't quite as much in this environment. But we really want to take advantage of whatever has been implemented successfully and be as adaptive as we can to that. One of the major phases that we've already completed for this project was the development of the high-level requirements by business area that will interact with and touch the system. And those requirements were all mapped back to our law so that we're very clear that what our requirement is something that's consistent with how we need to implement the law. Those requirements are part of the request for proposal process, so the vendors have good visibility of that, so they have an opportunity to understand what their system is going to have to do in order to meet our needs.
And this is another area where the change management that I talked about earlier is really key and important. It's getting, because we are going to change the way we do business around what the system offers us. So we are getting our people ready for those kind of changes because as you can imagine, if someone comes in and says, this is how you do your job today, tomorrow it's going to be totally different, start now, there's going to be a lot of angst and a lot of resistance. So we're trying to get them ready now, even though we don't know what the technology is today. It's getting their mindset ready for it. It's going to be something different, and we're here to support you. You have leadership here that's to support you through that process. So when we do know what that is, we'll provide you with the training and the tools and the support necessary so we can all be successful as we move forward.
Is there some measurement of how much we're using off the shelf versus customization? Is there some way to, as we go through it, to see sort of, our development? Are we moving towards using, having to spend more effort customizing because we've discovered that the off the shelf doesn't work? I'm just trying to understand, is there some way to monitor the division between those two?
Once we know what the solution is, we can set a baseline for that and say this is what comes with the system, this is what we're going to have to any kind of customization, and we can set that baseline up front so we can measure the progress and make sure that we're not starting to do more customization than we should be.
And in the requirements, we're asking the vendors to identify if this requirement is met through their custom program or through their existing program or requires customization. So we're trying to get a sense of that and can help use that information as part of our evaluative process.
I think that's important, but I also think that as the project, there's always going to be changes. And I think that, if what we're doing is we're starting to make more and more changes that are moving more and more towards customization, I think we should know that, and we should then have some evaluation from internally and our oversight systems.
I agree, because that's where you
as to
introduce
where,
risk.
right, that's where the risk happens. So that would be.
Well,
helpful. Thank you.
one more point on the oversight is right now you have independent project oversight. Once we get closer to actually choosing the vendor and selecting an implementer, we'll also be hiring an IV&V or an independent verification and validation, and they really are in the nuts and bolts and provide oversight on the development and build of the system. So they're going to be the additional eyes and ears to help you understand that they promised that this was part of the package and that this was custom. They're going to make sure that they help us to make sure that they stay with that, or if there is a change, that it's really vetted through a proper change process, and there's really a good risk analysis done on what happens as a result of that change. So.
Thank you. Tom?
I'm sorry, did you?
Tom?
Yeah, oh, okay.
I'm sorry.
Following up on Paul's question, I guess one of the, and I'm just asking, it would seem to me as as the project goes along and it's defined, you'll have the traditional demonstration of the application stacks. And I guess through that, we'll be able to see how much of it is custom, how much of it is based on open source things that you work through, and how much is just specially made. So that identification going forward, I think, will be helpful to understand the risk. But my guess is the base layer, database management layers will not be custom. Is that correct?
Yes,
We know,
the
yes,
initial
that's the
fork on the
case.
road was
Yes.
that we would not build this system. And I guess to Paul, give you some additional comfort, you're looking with fresh eyes at the strategy going forward. The thing I would complement that with is the staff view, which is looking back and having gone through a total custom build and the complexity, risk, and the times trauma that came from that project. Those people are now recognizing the value in the other approach. And that's why we chose it here. So it's tilted toward the other way because we've got the depth of experience of the risk in our bloodstream here. It's a little different than just objectively saying this is better than this, which is better than that. We know the cost and risk that came to the organization from a 100% custom effort.
And
So
I would add that they're even some of our most vocal advocates for
Right.
the change in approach.
it's real important. That's the internal voices around this and how we're structuring this. So.
That's a very good point, Jack. Thank you. Alrighty. Chris, how we doing on your presentation?
That's all I had.
We're good? All right. I don't have anyone else on the floor, so thank you very much, Jack. We're going to be taking a look at,
Yeah, I mean, hopefully this was worthwhile. We thought because of the resources involved, this part of the budget needed to be discussed a lot more detailed today than what we normally do. So in November, we'll come back with the additional information you asked for around some of those items. We would finalize your recommendation for the staff budget that gets included in the governor's budget. And then we will proceed with the RFP, of course, to fine tune the actual costs that will be for the system.
all right, super. We've come close to gaining, well, I don't know, I probably shouldn't say that.
Yeah. Don't jinx it, Dana.
So, yeah,
Don't jinx it.
let's do a time check. Our next item is scheduled for 30 minutes. I would like to break at 12:30, half an hour duty-free lunch, and we do have time certain at 1 o'clock. The time certain is with our contract with the University of Pacific for the economic impact study. So I would like to start that right at 1. All righty, so turning this back over to you, Chris, and I think Brian. Oh, no, I'm sorry, it's Robin for the closeout.
We're doing 4, right? Are we 4?
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I totally skipped over 4 and went directly to 5, so,
And there he is, the much talked
This
about.
item's supposed to be 4.
okay, hang on a second, because when I did all this in my head, I was on the wrong item.